Let's dive into the attribute error. Can't pickle local object in Python. This error usually pops up when you try to serialize, save or send, an object that contains a reference to a function or a variable defined locally within a function. Python's pickle module, which is often used for serialization, can't handle these local objects directly because their existence is tied to the specific function's execution context. This context disappears once the function finishes running. 1. Understanding the problem. The core issue is that pickle needs to store all the necessary information to reconstruct the object later. When a local object is involved, pickle doesn't know how to recreate that object because it has no access to the function's environment where it was created. Imagine trying to save a blueprint for a house without including the details of where the specific bricks came from. You can't rebuild the house exactly. 2. Common scenarios. This error often surfaces when using multiprocessing or multi-threading in Python. If you try to pass a function that uses local variables to a separate process, using multiprocessing.process or similar, the process won't be able to understand what those local variables represent. Similarly, if you try to pickle a class instance that relies on local objects, you'll run into trouble. 3. Solutions. The most straightforward solution is to avoid using local objects that are not pickleable. Instead, create global variables, class attributes, or use data structures that pickle can handle directly. For instance, if you have a function processing data, consider creating a class to hold the data and the relevant functions, making the data attributes of the class instead of local variables within the function. This way, pickle can easily serialize the data stored in the class instance without encountering problems. If you're using a library like joblib, it sometimes offers improved support for pickling complex objects. You may need to refer to the library's documentation for specific suggestions. 4. Example. Suppose you have a function that creates a local list and then attempts to pickle it using multiprocessing. Let's say you have a function myFunction that creates a local list inside itself, and you want to pass local list to a separate process using multiprocessing pool. Attempting to do so will cause the attribute error. A better approach would be to create local list as a class attribute, which is accessible to the functions working within the class and avoids the local object problem. 5. Debugging tips. When faced with this error, carefully examine the traceback to identify the exact line and the specific local object that is causing the problem. Use a debugger, like PDB, or print statements to inspect the values of your variables and understand how your program flows, helping you pin down the source of the non-pickleable local object. This methodical investigation will guide you in creating a revised program that successfully pickles your data without error. Remember to avoid relying on functions' internal environments for data persistence across serialization. Instead, leverage structured data containers accessible to all parts of your application.